Hello everybody, I am coming to you to share with you some changes I made to one of the patterns that's out right now for face masks for hospitals. It's a pretty popular pattern that a lot of people are doing right now, but I made a few alterations to make it, in my opinion, maybe a little safer for the people wearing them, and to make use of materials readily available right now because, as you probably know if you are looking at this, elastic is sold out just about everywhere all around the country. So thankful for that, because that means that so many people are making masks for people who need them, but that means people like you and me have to make do with what we can get our hands on. And so for this particular rendition, I guess, of the mask, I actually used some hair ties, some ponytail holders from the Dollar Tree. They are in packs of 100 for $1, so that's nice and affordable. I also used this. This is 20 gauge copper wire. It's used for crafting and jewelry making. I bought it at Walmart. I think it was like maybe $2.67, and it says that you get 8 yards in this little roll. So it's pretty economical also. And for each of the masks, depending on which size you're making from this pattern, you're going to use between like 5 3/4 inches to, I think my biggest is like 7 3/8 or something. So you don't use a ton of it. It can go a long way if you're willing to go pick one of these up or a couple of these up. As far as what our hospitals around here have requested, as far as that goes, they have asked for 100% cotton with the tightly woven weave. So not something super thin and airy, because obviously that means that if air comes through, so do germs. So those are the two things that I'd like to interject for this. Now for this pattern, I also did the insert version, so that's what I'm going to be displaying right now, and doing the step-by-step one. There is a version that is not made to use inserts. If you do that one, you might consider doing another layer or two, something like that, just a little more protection. But for this one, I did the one that could have an insert, just so that if somebody could potentially use one of the N95s, that they would be able to slip it in there. Or if not, you could do some filters some other way. I've seen people online talking about the micron barriers of vacuum cleaner bags and filters for your air conditioner, which is actually what I bought. So here's mine. It's like the super one. It's the biggest one, or the highest filter that I was able to find in stores. There may be something else more specially available online or something, but anyway, this one filters a ton, so you can look up specifics on that. It's something like 0.3 or something like that microns. But anyway, you can cut that up, and you cut the wires off, and then you iron flat the filter itself, and then you can cut 2-ply, 3-ply, whatever you want to cut, or even one if you're trying to make do for just something less dangerous, like being at home or whatever, going to the grocery store, whatever. And that way you can just rewash your mask and leave the filter. The filter can be reused. So anyway, here is the sample I made for myself. We were supposed to be going to the hospital, doing an MRI for my daughter, so I made her and me one, and here's what we got. So as you can see, it has nose wire, which has already been formed to my face because I took it off, but I can breathe. It doesn't pull on my ears, so the measurements on that are good. If you have elastic, regular elastic, cording or 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, something like that, you can do another option, but this is the ponytail holder that I talked about. You can also switch this out to something else. I also bought some of the head wrap headbands, the stretchy ones, to play around with that and see if that's a better option too. But here's what I got. Didn't take a lot of fabric, didn't take a lot of money, didn't take a lot of anything, but it can be a huge blessing. So use what you have on hand. And so that's it for the intro, and let's get started. So, okay, first I want to show you some things. So when you print this pattern, which I will give you the link to, it does not, when you cut out the size you need, first of all, make sure you print from the PDF, not from the website, because then you can make sure you have the 2 inches here. If you print it just from the HTML link, you are not going to have the right scale for the pattern. So make sure you you click the link and print the PDF. but you can double check the scale here to see if it's 2 inches. But this does not include a seam allowance. So if you are going to make the version of the mask that has the insert option, then you need to do the following measurements for your seam allowances. Around, like, let's just say I use this one. This is the small kid size. You're going to go around all of these sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, but this one is different. This one will be you'll draw a 1/2 inch line, and that will be the one for the piece that touches the face, the fabric that touches the face, and then you'll extend it a full inch, so another inch, and that is the, 1 inch from here, and that will be the main fabric cutting line. So I find it easier to trace my pattern. So here goes a Christmas box that I had laying around, but you trace it. You can see I did 3/8 inches all the way around, and then you have your line for cutting the insert or the lining, the line for cutting the main fabric, and then also you need to go in 1/4 inch from the original seam line, the one where the pattern piece fit. Go in 1/4 inch and draw a line. You're going to need that for folding later in the pattern, but that's it. Okay, but I find it easier, use whatever you got, cut it out. I think it's just easier to quickly trace when it's a thick piece of paper, not just a printer paper. So, but that's preference. Do what you need to do. And then yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So got some fabric right here. We're gonna make one, and I'll try to work step by step so you can see what I changed. Okay. All right. Okay, so now for first step, do you remember that line I said you needed to draw 1/4 inch to the inside of the original pattern piece? Okay, here's the original pattern piece that I cut. Here is where I put it on here to trace and make some seam allowances. And you can see I drew that little black line. That's a 1/4 inch inside of the original line, which is our seam actually. So it's a 1/4 inch inward on the earpiece. So draw that. You can draw it on your pattern piece if you want, and then make sure you transfer that to your actual pattern. We're gonna need that in a minute. But the first step will be for us to turn our pieces right sides together. So like this. You're gonna sew along the curved seam only. So we're gonna sew just right here along that 3/8 that we added on both pieces, insert and main fabric. And then once you've done that, you can either clip your curve, you know, like cut the little triangles all around the curve, or if you have pinking shears, now's a good time to just trim it a little bit to take out bulk with pinking shears. That's it. That's all we really have to do, because we just want to be able to make that lay flat, okay? And that's it. All right, so now we have trimmed our seams. And so here's where you have an option. The pattern calls for you to iron this flat. That's what we all have to do either way. We have to iron it. It calls for you to iron it to one side. So, you know, like all the way down, you would iron it to one side, and then you would iron the other one to the other side, so that when they meet up, they kind of sandwich together and everything lays flat. They do that because the following step has you top stitch. That means on the outside, you're stitching right close to the edge that you just ironed it on. You're stitching right next to it to keep it held down, so it stays flat all the time, even after you wash it and all that stuff. In the one that I made, I did not do that, and I felt like it did just fine. So in the interest of saving time, I do not plan to do that on the rest of these either. I just feel like it worked, so why mess with it? I can get more done if I don't worry about that step. You know, if I were trying to go for looks or something, it'd be a different story, but this is really more just for function, so that people who need this can have it. So I'm not going to do that. Feel free to do that if that is what you would rather do. However, if that is not what you plan to do, now is when we are going to put them together. So first I want you to choose the way you want to iron this. Either you want to iron it flat like I did, where you sort of like split the seam open this way and iron it down, or to the side, however you want to do it. I actually find it easier though, when you're going to split it like that, to iron it while it's still shut. I just kind of do this with my fingers and then go over it with my iron, okay? I find that easier. But either way, get that done. And then once you've done that, I want you to flip them inside out, like to right side showing, okay? and then I'll be right back. Okay, so before we go to the sandwiching process, I want to do this part next. This is the next step. The line you drew, the 1/4 inch inward from the original seam, go ahead and fold your inner piece. That should have only been marked on your inner piece, not on the main fabric. But go ahead and fold along that line. And then once you've folded, then you can like finger press it or iron it or whatever you want to do. I'll go ahead and iron it so you can see what I'm talking about. But there you go, press it down. So press it and then fold the raw edge to meet the crease you just ironed down, okay? So here's the raw edge and the crease. So you're gonna like fold it like that, okay? Fold it, make it meet, press it again, and then we're gonna top stitch. Do that to both sides of your inner piece, okay? And then next step, we'll be moving on from here. Okay, so now we have done our side seams. We are moving on to the wire. So here is where the original pattern has you sandwich the pieces together, and you kind of move on from there, make the pocket on the side, and voila, you're done. But this is where I add the wire. So the way that I think will be simplest for this is cut your strip of wire. This is the female and teenager wire. So it's kind of, I cut it to 7 3/8 inches. Take the tip of that and fold it back. I originally on my old one did like 3/8 inch fold back. You can see it's super pliable. If you have some jewelry pliers and you're able to like twist it up better or something, that's more optimal. But if you don't have the option, you don't have to have it, okay? And if you still feel like it's rough or something, I'm pretty sure that this wire can actually be filed a little bit if you have a super strong, like metal, maybe a metal file, metal emery board or whatever. But if not, you can maybe put a little dab of hot glue or something like that. But it hasn't bothered my daughter when she wore hers, and it didn't bother me when I put mine on. But what we're gonna do is make sure to curve both of them up towards the same direction. And then we're gonna point those toward the seam allowance so that it's sort of buried in the seam. So if it's gonna touch anything, it's gonna touch the seam and not the person's skin. But I don't think that's gonna be the case. I mostly did that little curved piece. The first one I did didn't even have that. But I mostly did that so that when it's washed, it won't poke through the fabric as easily and it'll be more durable. So that's where we are. So kind of like estimate where the middle is. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't be extremely perfect, but sort of see where the middle is, because that's where you need to put the seam on your piece for the bridge of the nose. So wherever that middle piece is, try to line that up with your seam allowance like this, okay? This is my main fabric. Use your main fabric for this. I did it retroactively in the one that I was wearing in the video a few minutes ago, but it made it more difficult because it shrunk the amount of coverage of the mask, because I wasn't ready to add that in. The pattern didn't call for it, and I didn't add any height to the pattern piece. So just in order to alleviate that headache altogether, we are just going to work within the seam allowance. So our seam allowance is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. What I want you to do is go ahead and stitch just on this piece, stitch your 3/8, and then this piece of wire, if you're using the 20 gauge that I used, truthfully it fits in a channel about a 1/16 of an inch, but I know that that's not very easy for most people to sew, so I'm going to tell you to do a 1/8 inch second line of sewing above, so closer to the edge of the fabric. So you're going to do your 3/8 and then up 1/8 of an inch, do another line. That'll be the channel that we're going to run the wire through, okay, on your main fabric piece. So go do that and come back. All right, that's all done. So now we have placed right sides together both of our pieces. Match your seam down the middle, your nose seam. This is when we're actually going to sew that 3/8 inch seam allowance that you drew, okay? So go ahead, starting with your backing piece. You don't really need to go all the way to the edge if you don't want to, but start with where your backing starts, your lining starts, and do your 3/8 inch seam. And then come back, we're going to insert the wire and do the second row. Okie doke, so now we've done that. So next step is to get the wire in. So you have two options. One, you can choose to go above your stitch line like we just did. We did the other 1/8 inch above line of stitching. You can choose to just run back over that and that will essentially create a channel, and you could slide the wire down into the middle of the channel. Or if you are better with like a zipper type situation, you can do that, and that's kind of what I do. So whichever one works better for you and your preferences. But what you're gonna do is take your wire, remember kind of where the nose piece is, put it in there, if you do it the way that I do, and then you're gonna sew down the side to lock it in place. If you choose to do the channel, do the same thing like I just mentioned, where you trace over your stitches and then you slide the wire in. Just remember, whichever method you choose to use, go ahead at the end of your wire, wherever the end of your wire is, and I'll show this when I'm done. I'll show what it should look like. But wherever the end is, do some vertical stitches to sort of lock it so it won't slide around in there, okay? And the closer you can get to the actual ends, folded over ends, the more secure it would be, and probably the longer it will last. So anyway, do that and I'll meet you back. All right, so if you were able to accomplish that, you should be left with something similar to this. You have a channel, probably a bunch of threads hanging like me that you'll need to trim off. But for right now, if you were able to get that done, yay, good job. Trim off whatever you don't need. We have essentially used up part of the seam allowance, so part of it that we would have normally trimmed, we just used for this encasing of the wire. So whatever you're able to trim. What I will tell you though, it shouldn't be too much, and you need to make sure you leave about, like you can see right there, that's where I put a stop in so that my wire won't continue to move left. You need to at least leave about a 1/2 inch right here though, because that will be necessary for you when you're folding this under to make it uniform, okay? So anyway, if you've done that, next thing you need to do, go ahead and use your 3/8 inch seam allowance here too to finish off your bottom, and then flip it inside out, and then we have a couple steps and we're all done. Okay, so if you made it that far, that means you've turned it, and it probably felt weird with the wire to turn it. It's kind of awkward, but works just fine. The wire rebends, it's no big deal. So go ahead and press it out. Also, when you get to your ends like these, you're gonna press them flat, which will just be really along that seam line that you made earlier when we were making a channel. And then after you've done that, you're gonna fold it just like we did before. Fold it to meet the crease, and then fold it back down and press again. And that's why it was important that you left a little bit of space, a 1/2 inch space, when you were trimming that inner lining, okay? So anyway, that's all it should be. I'll do mine real quick and then I'll show you what it looks like. But once you get to that point, we are almost done. Okie doke, so once you've done that, you will do your finishing touches on the edges. The pattern calls for you to top stitch down what you just folded. I honestly don't, I did it in the ones I've made so far, and in this one I did one side and not the other. And I don't really feel like it made a whole lot of difference since we're gonna sew it again. So anyway, do what you would like with that part. For mine, I'm gonna leave it like 1 and 1, I guess, but I probably won't do it in the future. But anyway, you should be left with something that looks sort of like this. So whether you top stitch it or not, this one I did not top stitch, I just ironed, okay? So what you want to do, this will be your pocket for the insert. So we're essentially going to divide this in half, and then again, and then press it, and it should meet but not cover. It's not like a pillowcase, but it should meet and not cover it, and then you have the pocket still available. Press that. Press it well, because we're going to be pulling on it for a second, because now is we're going to do elastic, okay? If you choose to do, if you have regular like length elastic and you want to use that, not a big deal. You can go ahead and sew this down. You can top stitch it shut along this, the edge of this folded part. If you're gonna do like what I did, because I didn't have enough elastic for all this, these are the little ponytail holders I purchased. The mask does not pull. This has not pulled on my ears or my daughter's ears, so I'm going to continue with the measurements. If you feel like it is too tight, you could always just put a little more length on the earpiece, and then it won't matter at all. So anyway, or you know, there are other options, like I bought some of the full-size stretchy headbands, and you can use those. You can have those go all the way around the head or whatever, okay? So anyway, for this one I'm just going to use these, but I'm going to try to keep the metal clasp on the inside. truthfully, it'll move around. It won't matter a whole lot if you don't do that initially. You can always just slide it back in. But these can be washed. They can be sterilized. It won't hurt anything. They'll be able to withstand the hospital. So anyway, once you've folded it, stick one of those. This part can get a little tricky if you're not careful, but because the hair bands are a little bit, the circle on the inside is a little bit shorter than the length of the fabric. But anyway, just stick it in there, pin it, clip it, whatever you use to hold stuff down. And then once you've done that, you're just gonna sew, you're gonna top stitch along that seam that's closest to your lining fabric. So the one you folded right here, the one you would have already top stitched if you were using regular elastic. But top stitch it down. And then when that's all done, we're finished. So voila, you made it, you did it, and it's useful. If you have finished it all, we should have something along these lines. I'll try it on so you can see. So we have something like this. I can still breathe through it, but it offers some protection, and obviously a filter could go inside of there to have added protection. But it fits fine, and you can form the wire to where you need it to be in your face to block out any additional germs from entering. So anyway, voila, that's it. I hope you were able to get something from this tutorial to add in the little wire. Again, this is not my personal pattern. I just kind of adjusted it for the needs around us and what we had on hand. So I hope it helps you, and I hope you use it to go out and bless someone else. So have a good day.